Hello, thank you for coming and welcome to the Expert SharePoint webinar by Datapolis. With me today is Gokan Ozcifci, SharePoint MVP and consultant from the company Neoxy in Belgium, who will host a session on top 15 SharePoint Server configuration and offloaded service mistakes and how to avoid them. For those of you who are with us for the first time, this is a brief introduction. My name is Maciej Józefowicz. I work for the company Datapolis, the provider of workflow solutions for SharePoint, and I'm the manager of this webinar series. We organize sessions with SharePoint MVPs and consultants from different countries on various SharePoint issues and functionalities to share with you some knowledge that we believe is useful in your daily work. We had already webinars about workflows, about process management and stuff, and now we go back to some basics. Before you start using SharePoint, you need to configure it, and Gokan here will tell you how to do it right. This presentation is about 60 minutes long. It's a bit larger than normal, and then we plan to do a few minutes of questions and answers. In the meantime, during the session, if you have any questions, just write them in the questions panel, and Gokan or me will answer them. So, this is a long session ahead of us, so enough of the talk, and I'm switching to Gokan. Enjoy the session.
So, we'll begin just now, beginning presentation. Hey, voila. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the SharePoint webinar, actually called the Top 15 SharePoint Server Configuration and Offloaded Service Mistakes, which lead actually your company to move to the cloud. This session or this webinar is intended for Datapolis members, and the content has been adapted for them. So this was actually a presentation which I made several times for other conferences, but the content of this session has been adapted. I hope you really enjoy it, but before beginning the session, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Gokan Ozcifci, and I'm from Brussels, Belgium. I'm a freelance consultant working for Neoxy.be. It's my own company actually. I am since 3 years a SharePoint MVP and since last year a Microsoft certified trainer. I joined this year the Microsoft Extended Experts team, who is a local group supported by Microsoft Belgium and Luxembourg, who actually evangelize all kinds of products of Microsoft, including SharePoint, definitely. My Twitter handle is the @GokanOzcifci. Tweet about me, follow me, ask your questions. If you have any, question, if you don't understand anything, shoot me a tweet, direct message me. I'll try to answer as soon as possible. And the last part is my blog, gokan.ms. You can find all my infrastructure, SharePoint, all kind of articles on it. You will find my presentations, pictures of events and conferences, webinars, videos, etc. So this is a little bit about me. And now, before the session, I'd like to apologize myself for my French accent. As said, I'm from Belgium. We have several official languages, and the main languages are actually the Dutch and the French ones. I'm from the center, and I'm actually speaking French. So you will see my accent, really, it's French. So if there is something that you really don't understand and say, hey, this is not good and I can't understand because its English is very bad, well, no problem. Tweet about it, send me a mail. I'll try to answer as soon as possible. The agenda for today is quite simple. We will see actually tips and tricks for Windows Server. We will see how you should actually optimize your SQL Server for SharePoint. The third point will be actually how you should actually respect all the best practices for SharePoint. The fourth point will be Office 365. What's the real advantage of Office 365 for large enterprises or for mid-sized enterprises? The fifth point will be the monitoring. Sixth, it will be the patching. And the seventh will be the client, your laptop or your face. The thing is, with this session, it's not really an admin oriented session. It's also a developer session. It's also content owner. It's also architect session. It's a session who will cover a little bit of everything, but not deep dive, meaning that you, as an administrator, as an architect, as a developer, should be able to say, hey, my SharePoint site is slow. Maybe it's due to SQL Server configuration or due to Windows Server configuration. And after this session, you'll be able to say, okay, this is maybe my issue on my own premises.
Before even hearing about the business requirements, you're already thinking about, oh, should I be cloud ready? Should I use Office 365 Azure? How should my authentication, authorization, and blah, blah, blah. The real business requirements actually are maybe more easier than that we are thinking. Maybe they just want to have reports, a portal, or an intranet. Maybe they just want to see dashboards and use out-of-the-box workflows. So before actually getting to use SharePoint, getting to consume SharePoint, or just preparing SharePoint, the first thing that we should know as an engineer is what are my really business requirements. This is actually the picture that I'm seeing of SharePoint. A very, very complex SharePoint, but this is actually what the business sees working on it. They always see the 404, the 403 forbidden, server errors, or correlation IDs. Very, very ugly. And this is actually the phase that your business will do. They will say, hey, dude, we paid a lot of money. We spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of resources, and my SharePoint is still slow. My SharePoint goes always down. What's the issue? What's the problem, they will say, and you won't be able to answer. And then they will say, hey, dude, there is Office 365. Office 365 provides me blah, blah, blah. It gives me the best SLA that you can't offer me. They give me clutter. They give me, I don't know, new features. They give me the ability to use my site on a Windows phone or on an iPhone. And you can't give that to me. With that, I'm leaving just the Microsoft sales speech, and I'm going to the visionaries. Actually, Gartner is a great visionary. And they also share some statistics. They say, hey, business guys, listen to me. I'm Gartner, and I'm going to sell you, or I'm going to just teach you what I see for 10 years, maybe. They will say, for SharePoint, we see in 2013, and said on the Worldwide Partner Conference, 35% of existing SharePoint customers will never move to the cloud. 15 will become pure cloud customers, and 50 will adopt the hybrid platform. 1 year later, again at the Worldwide Partner Conference in Washington, D.C., a senior Microsoft leader admitted hybrid was bigger than earlier estimated. They said 15 to 20% of existing SharePoint customers will never move to the cloud, 10% will become pure cloud customers, and 70 to 75% will adopt a hybrid SharePoint platform. They continue, and they say, through at least 2025, at least 25% of enterprises will choose to keep their core communications and collaboration systems on premises due to security and privacy concerns. Several new features from Microsoft, such as Delve, Clutter, and Office for iOS and Android, are only available to cloud customers. So the speech continues. They will say, hey, I have Delve, who will never be available on premises. I have Clutter, I have Office, your SharePoint is slow, your SharePoint is always down, and blah, blah, blah. And they still continue. They will say Microsoft is clearly shifting from a cloud first to a cloud only company. And on-premises users will generally pay more, get less, and wait longer, which is actually true. Because with Office 365, if there's a new feature, in a few days, weeks, you'll get it on your tenant. But when you check the service packs or the cumulative updates, well, maybe you have to wait 2 months on an on-premises platform. They also share statistics, but this is not Gartner, but more Microsoft. They say, hey, from 100% of licenses, 90% is using Exchange. 6% is using Skype for Business, the old link server, and only 4% is using SharePoint. So this means actually that SharePoint is very, very, very little used on the cloud platforms. Our job, or way of doing is to improve our platform to be sure that we never actually should hit any businessman, any business people actually to say, hey, your SharePoint platform sucks, I want to go to the cloud because I have that and that and that and that as advantage. If you can provide them a SharePoint platform who works very well, you don't have any slownesses, your SharePoint is always up, your business is happy, then the question will never come like, hey, I want to go to the cloud. Okay. The first thing that we are going to check is Windows Server. The administrators, the developers, should be sure that the Windows Server performance options are set on adjust for best performance. How do you do that? Well, you should go on your SharePoint server, check on computer, properties, advanced systems, settings, and visual effects. Please be sure that the Windows Server is adjusted for best performance. And you will always see on the right above side, you have the information governance. I will put information governance or a PowerShell logo on each slide, meaning that this should be done in your governance. Each new server added to the farm, each new server added to the SQL Server instance cluster should actually be on the same configuration level, adjust best performance. Second point is use the correct power plan. I'm pretty sure nobody does that because we don't have knowledge about it. But you have to know that Windows Server hasn't been configured for SharePoint Server. So it's up to you to change that. By default, it's on balanced, but you have to choose on high performance. Again, you can see on the right side, I again put it on information governance, meaning that this should be taken in your governance plan and it should be done on each SharePoint server. Okay. Fine-tuning Windows Server, point 3, reducing the I/O. We know if you put everything on one disk, and if the disk goes down, if it has a problem, your SharePoint has a problem. So what I can give to you is to saying, hey guys, please make a difference between the system files, the index files, and the log files. Why? Because if you put everything on one disk, the read and the write on the disk will be actually huge, because it's gonna write and read about system files, index files, and logs files. As you can see on the image, you should really make a clear difference between all kind of storage. If the index goes down and it has a problem, well, the only index has a problem, not the system state or the log files. If the logs has a problem, okay, cool, the logs has a problem, but your system and your index are still okay. So it's up to you guys to define your disks and be sure to reducing the I/O on the disk itself. Disabling or stopping unused services. I said Windows Server hasn't been created for SharePoint Server, and you have services like Spooler, Audio Survey, Tablet Input Service, who is actually not meant for SharePoint Server. So it's up to you to see which services are using unnecessarily. And if they are unused by SharePoint, just disable them. It's maybe 2 times nothing, but your server won't run this service again. So you'll be gaining on resources, on performance, etc. The page file, very, very important for SharePoint also. A page file is actually a dump. If your server crashes, the virtual memory, the total amount of the virtual memory should be actually written in a page file. So if there is an issue, your server has crashed, you still can read the dump file and see why it has been crashed. For SharePoint, it's actually simple. You should take the total amount of memory and give them the 1.5 point more. So if you have 8 GB of RAM, your page file should be at least 12 GB. If you have 20 GB of RAM, your page file should be at least 30 GB. Okay, and again, how do we do that? Computer properties, advanced system settings, performance settings, advanced virtual memory, and settings. So this is typically a task for the administrator. He should be doing that. The load balancer. The latency between SharePoint Server and SQL Server should be less than 1 millisecond. This is a prerequisite. If you don't get this one, you don't have the support of Microsoft. What does this mean in a business language? You have to do 1,000 pings to the server, and only one ping may fail. If you have 2 pings failing, well, you are not in the 1 millisecond latency between SharePoint and SQL. All the servers should be hosted on the same data center. That's correct. With this way of working, you're sure to be getting the latency between SharePoint and SQL less than 1 millisecond. But you don't have to forget that if your data center has a problem, your SharePoint server or your SharePoint farm can be down. So I'm always saying like, hey, if you want to go in redundant, you have to put at least 2 applications on one data center and 2 on the other data center. So if the data center 1 crashes, all the requests can go here. But are you sure to getting the 1 millisecond of latency between SharePoint and SQL? Again, it's up to you to check to be sure to get this prerequisite. Please don't ever use the network load balancing, the free balancing tool of Microsoft, but get a real load balancer like F5. F5 is actually also the tool used behind Office 365. Okay. And yeah, this is something that I like to say, but I'm not sure that Microsoft is following me. But you have to know that there are actually 2 new formulas. The 3 is the new 2 and the 7 is the new 5. It looks Chinese, I have to admit it, but it makes sense. With SharePoint 2007 and SharePoint 2010, we said, even with 2013, we said in the beginning that if you have 2 servers, you're load balanced. But the problem with 2 servers is if your server goes down, the one goes down, well, all the requests goes to the first one. And are you sure as an admin or as an architect that your server is actually able to handle all requests? I don't know, or you don't know. So you need to have at least 3 servers. 3 is the new 2. Why? Because if this service goes down, you still have 2 servers for handling all requests. Now you're really load balanced. And with that logica, if you go to 7 is the new 5, we always said, hey guys, if you have 2 front ends, 2 application, and 1 SQL, which makes 5, you are role balanced. But if you take the 3 is the new 2, you need to add 2 servers to be 100% uptime. Meaning 3 web front ends, 2 applications, 2 SQLs, or 2 web front ends, 3 applications, and 2 SQLs. I know it looks like Chinese, but it makes sense if you're always using SharePoint as a platform. Operational tasks. I know many people aren't using swap servers, but you have to know and understand as an admin, as an architect, as a developer, or maybe as a businessman, that your D environment is actually a production environment for your developers. Your qualification is a production environment for your content owners. And the production is the production for your business. So I, as a developer, as an architect, as an administrator, can't say, hey, I'm gonna just install a new patch in queue and see what it does. No, because the queue is the production of your content owners. They are using it every day, they are making tests every day, etc. So please get a server for you, a swap server, I call it. You can name it whatever you want, but try to have impact only on your server, because you can't imagine the time and the effort and the money it costs to break an environment and to get it up running again. You will lose maybe 10 minutes or maybe 3 days by installing a service pack, as an example. The second point is script as much as possible. You need to script everything. What I'm always saying, try to script everything, because humans can make errors, scripts can't. If you script everything, like from site creation to site deletion, from site collection creation to site collection deletion, from content types creation to content types deletion, well, if you write it once, you can use it for all your environments. And the probability of making Human errors is quite null. And I'm saying you, if they ask me to create 100 sites in one day, I'm pretty sure I will forget some sites, or I will just mistype any site name. But with your own framework, with your own PowerShell commands, it won't be impossible. And try to favorize the object model. Don't be the developer, the admin who is making web.config modifications by editing the web.config with Notepad. Please don't do it. Use PowerShell, use the object model. I give the example of the web.config. If you want to enable blob cache, etc. on the web.config, it's simple. On TechNet, on blog posts, you will always see, hey, just make a copy for web.config, edit the first one, add the sentence, and it's done. It will work. No, it won't work. Because if you have several servers, you have to do it manually on all servers. But if you use the object model, it will go directly to the configuration database, and from the config database pushed on all the servers. So the way of making errors is null. No downtime. Okay, make it sense? Cool. So the SQL Server. SQL Server actually quite huge. The first thing that I would actually recommend to you to avoid having any downtime of performance is using a SQL alias. A SQL alias is actually a name that you give to your instance, and SharePoint is talking to the alias, and what's behind the alias actually doesn't matter. So if your SQL server has a problem, you can easily change the SQL server. SharePoint will still continue talking to the alias, and as you can see on the image, the server name is here inf SQL Corp 234. It can be 123, doesn't matter, as SharePoint is always talking to SQL1. Okay, it will help you if the SQL server has a problem. You can directly change the SQL server, and the business won't know it. They even won't notice it. Okay. SQL Server groups and always on. Here is an image created by ShareQL. It's a local company here in Belgium with Serge Lucas and Isabelle Van Kampenhout. They actually explain you how it works. So you have a SharePoint farm who listen to a SQL Server farm, and the SQL Server actually writes in a sync mode from instance 1 to instance 2. And you have your SharePoint farm 2 who directly writes to another. And in the async mode, you can get it write it down on the other one. This is actually how SharePoint and always on availability groups works. To make it clear, very simple, I have my user, Joker, who is in New York. He is working on SQL Server 1. The SQL Server 1 crashes, and it goes to SQL Server 2. This is actually the image that the video that I showed to you in a very simple way. My SQL Server crashes, my farm automatically connects to another one. This is actually the supported databases. Every database is supported, and everything can be done if you stay on the same data center. Take the example that actually the New York data center crashes. The SQL Server 1 and SQL Server 2. Joker has to move from New York to Brussels because it's another data center. We call it disaster recovery. And here, the database support model is actually quite different. The admin content is not being supported. The config database is not supported. The Power Pivot not tested. User profile, no. State service, no. Search analytics, search admin, no. As you can see, many of these databases are not supported from switching from one data center to another data center. Please be careful before promising to the business that always on actually on different data centers will help you a lot. You should be actually knowing what it can do and what it don't do. SQL Server, you need to know, or the SQL admins should know, that SQL Server is actually the heart of your SharePoint platform. And the heart should be powerful enough. For small farm deployments, like between 0 and 500 gigabyte of data, the RAM should be 8 gigabyte. For medium, 16. For large, 32. For very large, 64. And special cases, more than 64. These are the minimum requirements. So please, if you are sure that 8 gigabyte won't be enough, don't give them 8 gigabyte. Please try to give more. If your heart has a problem, SharePoint has a problem. Makes sense. Always use a dedicated SQL Server. And the sentence written here is actually something that I took from TechNet. For optimal performance when operating server farms, we recommend you to install SQL Server 2008 R2 with Service Pack 1 and SQL Server 2012 on a dedicated server that is not running other rows or farms and does not host databases. Really, this one will actually improve your performances. The second point also, collation. I know many SQL Server databases who won't change this. It's no big issue if you leave it by default collation, but I guarantee you if you change this to Latin 1 General CI, IS, KS, VS, you will gain in performance. So the question that you are gonna ask is, hey, I didn't change it on the installation. 6 months later, I want to change it. Well, it's simple. You can't change it. You really can't change it. What you have to do is actually delete the instance, recreate it. So take all the databases from the drive, put it somewhere else, delete your instance, recreate your instance, and do a migration again. So please be sure to select the right collation before using SharePoint. The NTFS allocation size unit should be 64K. By default, Windows has a 4K read and write on the disks. But SQL Server reads and writes at 64K at a time. So if you change this from 4K to 64K, I'll guarantee you will have 30% of improvement in your farm. How do you do that actually? Just open CMD on the server where your data is hosted and make a check disk on the disk. If you want to change it again, you have to format the disk. But please be sure before putting any data on the disk that the disk is formatted on 64K. Okay? Again, some best practices like setting the minimum and the maximum server value. And how do you do that is by default, actually SQL Server sets the minimum memory to 2 petabyte, which means that if you have 120 or just 10 gigabyte of memory, SQL Server will say, hey, I can go until 2 petabytes, so I will take all the memory. And if Windows Server says, hey, I need a little bit memory for any task, SQL Server will say, no, I'm not giving you anything. I will use everything of the memory. It's up to you to change that and to give only 80% of the total amount of memory to SQL Server. Second point is set the maximum fill factor per index to 80%, activate the backup compression, and set the max degree of parallelism or the max DOP to 1. It's a best practice on SharePoint Server 2010. It's a prerequisite for SharePoint 2013 and 16 for the vNext. Again, fine-tuning, continue, use a dedicated search instance. If you have more than 10 million of items for the search, please use a dedicated instance. For the antivirus, exclude all data files, transaction logs, and backup files from the real-time scan. I'm not saying that you have to exclude everything from the scan, but from the real-time scan. Yeah? If at 2 hours, 2 p.m., when everything is working on SharePoint, be sure that the data files are not being checked by the antivirus every second. It will just give many problems. On SQL Server, again, install only the features and components that you need. SharePoint only requires database engine services. Many times I see SQL admins or developers just hitting every engine possible to be sure that SharePoint will work correctly, but selecting everything won't mean that SharePoint will work correctly. Be sure that only the database engine service is needed for the minimum working of SharePoint. And yeah, the classic one, do not enable statistics, makes sense. Another part is on SQL. Please don't use the product configuration wizard, because this is actually how SharePoint creates his databases. You will always see GUIDs. Why? Because this is actually an auto protect of SharePoint. When he creates databases for you, he don't know if the database already exists. So for avoiding deleting the existing database, he just puts a GUID to be sure that he won't erase any data. But as you can see, this doesn't look professional. So if you have to do operational tasks, backup, restores, etc., it will be very, very difficult for you to write the name. And hopefully the business won't see the name of these databases. It's gonna have a lot of issues. The enemy are the GUIDs. So please try to favorize PowerShell for creating your SharePoint environment. The classic stuff, I'm gonna not have a long talk about that. Finally, the SharePoint tips and tricks. Your business, you, the product owners, platform owners, should actually understand SharePoint. Actually, SharePoint covers a huge set of individual technologies like Exchange, Hyper-V, Windows Server, Yammer, Office 365, and blah blah blah. SharePoint is not SharePoint on its own. He needs Active Directory, he needs Windows Server, EIS Server, SQL Server. He needs a lot of these things. And it's continuously changing. If Windows Server changes, SharePoint will the behavior of SharePoint will also change. If SQL Server changes, the behavior of SharePoint Server will also change. You, and only you, should know what's the difference between out-of-the-box and custom component. If the business requirement is, I need a list, and I want to be able to add documents inside, you know that it can be done out of the box. Please don't write custom code for that. You should know your users. We know we have a lot of Yammer haters. Yammer, the social platform for SharePoint and all Microsoft stuff. We have a lot of people who doesn't like Yammer. Please don't go to your business if you know people hating Yammer and saying like, hey, I have found the best platform ever, please use Yammer. If they hate Yammer, don't propose them Yammer. Okay? For the search, again, the search is the most powerful and most painful component of SharePoint. And it's up to you as an administrator, as an architect, to distribute the load on multiple crawl servers. That you have to adjust the time. Like I want to have a full crawl every morning. I want to have an incremental crawl every 4 hours and blah blah blah. It's up to you to decide that. But please don't make any full crawl during the business hours. Because if you make a full crawl, your search results won't be available. It will recreate the index. Your SharePoint server will be using a lot of resources, RAM, CPU, etc. And people will get unhappy. So if you want to make any full crawl outside of the business hours, you want to use continuous crawl, no problem, but be sure that the continuous crawl is really necessary, because it will just consume resources, CPU, memory, etc. So again, up to you, people. Hey, this is my search. The search has been divided on 2 servers. Okay, it works great. I have to create my content sources, adapt the schedule, be sure that I'm doing a lot, not a lot, very, very minimum during the business hours. And when people go home, then I want to launch the full crawl, etc., etc., for having the minimum impact on the server itself. This is actually a slide that I've taken from Victor William from his session, and he took it from Neil Hutchinson or something like that. The search component actually exists from 6 components. You have the administration, the crawler, the CPC, the APC, the index, and the query processing. As you can see, the administration is actually using a little bit about CPU, a little bit about network, a little bit about disk, and very little about memory. But if you check the crawler, you can see on network-wise, he's using a lot. He's also using a lot about CPU, disk, and memory. So you can see he made a little table about with all the bullet points. But the most important thing here to know is the 6 components. If I want to distribute the load, how should I do that? So the first thing is, if you have one server, well, quite simple. Every component goes on the same server. If you have 2 servers, it's become interesting. Then Victor says, okay, one server will get the index and the query, the right side, and the other server will receive the CPC, APC, admin, and crawl. If you have 3 servers, okay, great. One server will receive the index and the query, the other will receive the admin and crawl, and the last and the third one will receive the APC and the CPC. Which means that if you want to have a real fully redundant search server, you need 6 servers to be sure that your search is fully redundant. Fine-tuning, resource-intensive service applications. These 4 are the most resource-consuming, resource-intensive service applications. The Excel service application, the search service application, usage and health data collection, and user profile service application. So if you use all these services on only one server with 8 GB of RAM, you will have a lot of issues. Okay. Again, please don't do any application pool recycle or IAS reset during the business hours. The application pool recycle will kill the site. He will just clear the IAS cache and recompile it if you surf on it. But IAS reset will kill all the application domain, reset the cache, and recompile everything. So if you do an IAS reset at 2 p.m. when everybody works on your work, well, good luck. Everybody will be unhappy. Again, the crawler jobs, the backup jobs, and the large list operations. All classic stuff. I don't want to take your time explaining all that, but please be sure that these 4 blocking points, that you don't do it during the business hours. Please do not do any backup when everybody works on your SharePoint. It doesn't make any sense. SharePoint has 4 tips of caching. You have the distributed cache, the object cache, client cache, and output cache. The object cache, as an example, is just creating users like super user and super reader and give them the read write on your application, web application, and your cache will be operational. The client cache is for websites which using CSS and JavaScript for public facing, or the output cache is for publishing features. But you have to know that these caching methods exist, and many times it's for the blob cache, as an example, is just adding a line in the web.config or using the object model and enabling it. So please be aware that this kind of caching model exists and try using it. You will never hear people or business guys saying, hey, my SharePoint server or my SharePoint site is very fast. Please let it go slower. They will never say that, but they will always say, hey, my SharePoint site is very slow. Please speed it up. And how do you speed it up? Thanks to the distributed cache, the object cache, the client cache, the blob cache, the output cache, every possible caching, try using it. And I'm not saying that the caching will help you a lot or it will solve every problem. It's not because that you are using the caching model that your SharePoint sites will go very fast, but I'm pretty sure it will at least help you going fast. Okay. Databases. A few best practices again. The content databases shouldn't be more than 200 gigabytes. It's actually making sense for backup and restore operations and operational tasks, etc. Again, for the administrators, be sure that you don't have more than 5,000 site collections per content database, that you have only 10 application pools per server. This value can be extended, but I don't know how. I know that Microsoft is giving support for more than 10 application pools, but I'm pretty sure that if you open a ticket at Microsoft and your hardware requirements doesn't fit the minimum requirements, well, they can say that, hey, your application, you have a lot of application pools, please be sure that you don't actually have more than 10 application pools. 10 web applications per SharePoint farm, 20 web applications by SharePoint farm, and please again don't use the product configuration wizards as it makes GUIDs on the databases. Okay, but again, a few best practices on how actually to manage your SharePoint farm to be sure that you don't have any issue on performance. Second point, set quotas on web applications. We have quotas, we can put quotas on sites, please use it. The administrator, the developer, or the business should be actually the people who is asking for it. They should say, hey, for this kind of sites, for collaboration, as an example, I want to have quotas, and my sites should be actually never more than 1 gigabyte. And you can set it up, and please do it, because if you don't get any quota on your web application, everybody will get inside and put maybe videos and games and I don't know why, MP4s, you know, if you don't have any restriction, everybody will put it inside. The CLR, the Disable Certification Revocation List, is actually your SharePoint server. Try to go to the internet the first time if you install it, and if your server doesn't have any internet connection, well, you can get errors. Please disable that. How do you do that? It's just adding the crl.microsoft.com address in your host file, or just download the certificates and put it in your certificate in MMC. In that way, you will avoid having issues. Authentication. If you can choose the authentication protocol, please try to choose anonymous because it's the fastest one. Claims is the second fastest, Kerberos the third, NTLM fourth, Forms 5, and ADFS is the slowest authentication protocol. I'm not saying that you have always the chance to choose, but if you can choose, please try to choose the anonymous one. Use wake up scripts. We all know SharePoint has an auto application pool kill process who will actually every morning at between 1 and 2, I guess, kill the application pool. Be sure that you have wake up scripts actually called on the internet, that you download them, install it, and before the business hours execute it. So your SharePoint server will be hot, the sites will be compiled, and when the first person go on SharePoint, the site is very well, no problem. And please only extend if you have a different authentication protocol. Again, so if you have a site, the site has to have 2 authentication protocol. The first should be anonymous, the other one is NTLM by example, then you have to make an extension. If your site has only 1 authentication protocol, there is actually no need to make extends, because each extend will actually consume memory, consume CPU, create a new WAAD, PoSH, PXA, etc., etc. So don't make extends, make them only if you have a different authentication protocol. Again, for the business, a few points. SharePoint 2013 is very different of SharePoint 2010. You have new service applications like machine translation. You have offloaded services like Yammer, OneDrive for Business, Office Web Apps, Workflow Manager, etc. You have the improved service applications. First, the search has been redesigned. You have the Not UI binder services to manage with PowerShell. If you want to use application management, you know, the apps from the SharePoint store, you need to configure the subscription management, who can be done only with PowerShell, etc. So all that kind of stuff you as a business should know, because all these things all together will make your SharePoint platform. Again, your administrator should know few things like what's supported and what's not supported, what's discontinued, what's new. An example from not supported feature is the dynamic memory on Hyper-V or on VMware. Your SharePoint server should always have static memory. Like my server has 60 GB of memory point, not dynamic. Discontinued features like web analytics, you should know it. The administrator should also know, as an example, Windows Server 2012 R2 is only supported on the SharePoint Server 2013 Service Pack 1 environment. So please don't try to install SharePoint Server 2013 on a Windows Server 2012 R2 if you don't have the Service Pack 1. These small things will actually improve your life managing SharePoint. You have to know also that you can share services between SharePoint. That you can say, okay, I have my application server, my search will run inside, and I will push the search to other servers. They manage metadata also, user profile also, and the only service, or the only that I know that won't work across farms is the application management service. So please don't try to get it work because it won't work. As an administrator, you also should know that the preferred way of creating sites has changed. Before we were always using the path name site collection, now we are using the host name site collection. Meaning that before we always had hokan.com/sites/it or /sites/hr. Now it's becoming it.hokan.com or erash.hokan.com, like the Office 365 way. Tips and tricks for Office 365. Just a little bit of water. You have to know that with Office 365 you don't have any maintenance, no updates, no upgrades, no scripting, no hardware costs, no backup. You reduce your costs, you only pay for it. You have a lot of storage with OneDrive and SharePoint. You have Delve, iOS apps. You can remote working, external sharing, cluttering groups, etc. All the advantages of the 65 are here. That's a lot. The drawback of SharePoint: performance. Licenses, you have to pay your Windows license, your SQL license, your SharePoint, Office 2013 or 2016, your Office Web Apps licenses, and calls. You have to pay actually for everything. And when you think you have a DQP environment with your swap server, well, it makes a lot of licenses. Maintenance, consultants, yeah, they cost a lot, huh? You can imagine. Upgrades, downgrades. Actually, the upgrades or downgrades, it's okay. You have to do it. But what if an upgrade break your SharePoint site? And that's an example that I love to give. Ferrari.com is a SharePoint site. Take the example that you are upgrading or you are patching the SharePoint farm, and everything goes down, and it won't come back again because you break it. So people, when they go to Ferrari.com, they will see the ugly the EES page, the welcome page of EES. I don't think that Ferrari will like that. So, okay, you will lose money due to upgrades, downgrades, but actually what does each hour of downtime cost your business? That's the real question that you have to ask. SQL Server, as said, keeping the default SharePoint database settings. That's a or the biggest drawback that I ever saw on SharePoint Server. IT infrastructure related errors like DNS errors can have impact on SharePoint. Web application frontend on F5 can give problems. Hyper-Vs, Active Directory, all infrastructure related issues can have impact on SharePoint. Scrimping on RAM and using the magic configuration wizard. All this kind of stuff, actually, they are drawbacks of SharePoint. People will say, oh, I'm paying a lot of licenses, paying for maintenance, paying for upgrades, and somebody just deletes DNS entry and my SharePoint site don't work anymore. Well, good luck explaining to your business or to your manager who said, hey, I've spent millions of dollars and it still won't work. Again, Microsoft, they said, hey, according to Microsoft, there are only few methods available to minimize the amount of downtime. It is quite not possible to archive 100% of uptime. So, meaning that you can do anything you want, you will never have 100% of uptime. There will be always something who will actually bring downtime to your SharePoint file. The application for recycle, EES, VS Space, solution updates, service pack installation, etc., etc. All this stuff actually will bring your SharePoint down. So you can provide anything you want, you can put any infrastructure you want. It's quietly not possible to have 100% of uptime. But with SharePoint Server 2016, it should be possible. With the min roles and the zero downtime patching, etc. We don't still have any information about that. But what was not possible with 2013 should be possible with SharePoint 2016. So with all these things, your business will say, hey, you suck. Your SharePoint doesn't work because you didn't change any SQL Server setting. You didn't respect any best practice of SharePoint. You're scrimping on RAM. You use the pre-configuration wizard. I've paid you a lot. I've paid the licenses, the consultants, and my SharePoint server goes always down. But people should know actually, or you should actually go to your business and say, oh, what's the issue? It's a library that has an issue. It's a list. Is the color? What kind of coloration do you get? Is it slow? Is it very slow? Is it DNS error? Is it a site error, a server error, an application error? It doesn't make sense to yell and say, hey, my SharePoint is down. Because SharePoint is more than a library, is more than a list. It's way more than a site. SharePoint is a platform. And for the business, if they get this kind of pages, which actually means a lot for me, because the 404 is not the same as the 403, is not the same as a server error, and is not the same as a correlation ID page. But for the business, they are all the same. SharePoint is down. But they have to understand, or the business people should understand, that SharePoint is an N-tier and layer platform, meaning that you can have web frontends, or for the beginning at least one web frontend, one application, and one SQL. When the project rollouts, you can say, hey, I've heard about SQL Server 2012, where you can have always on. So you will put always on. Cool. You will get more servers because you want to use more service applications like search, like user profile, like metadata, like Excel services. You need to have more services because one server isn't capable to handle all the requests. Oh, cool. You want to use the public-facing websites. You need to add the new DMZ zone. You need to have a disaster recovery environment. So you are adding a new SQL server. Oh, cool. I want to use Office Web Apps because I want to have the availability to edit a document in my browser. Oh, you need more service because for X reason you want to use another service. You can have interaction with other platforms. Oh, cool. You can use actually the cloud. You can have Office 365. You can also use Azure, and you can have your DearSync client who will actually take all the accounts and put them to the cloud. This is SharePoint. And when people say, hey, my SharePoint is down, well, what's down? Is it my application? Is it my web front end? Is it my SQL? Is it my DearSync server? Is it my Office Web Apps? What is down? Business should clearly know the difference between my SharePoint is down and a component of a SharePoint is down. A component, not the whole system. The monitoring, the golden rule actually here is we as IT should actually be able to know the error before the business. So if the business sends you a mail like, hey, my site is down, well, you failed because your business already knows it. Up to you to get the error, to resolve the error before the business they know it. Then you have win. And how do you do that? I listed all these things here. A few one is like monitor the complete SharePoint Server environment. Makes sense. Monitor the database page usage. Makes sense, because if your database is full, people can't insert documents anymore. Monitor the status and health of SharePoint services and web applications, as well the uptime of each SharePoint server, and blah blah blah. You can read it and please execute it. Monitor each kind of thing on SharePoint. The golden rule, again, you should be able to know the issue before the business and resolve it before the business. If they send you a mail, you failed. The patching, how does it work? You have your simple SharePoint farm, server 1, server 2, who are actually connected on one SQL. You patch your SharePoint server, the second works, patching done, your SharePoint is working on a backward compatibility mode. It needs the product configuration wizard. But if you want to execute it now, he will say, hey, your server 2 is not on the same level as me. Please patch the second one to be sure to use the config. So you're gonna patch the second one, but bam, everything is down because the both are now installed and you need psconfig on both machines. So you can execute it on the first one, then on the second one, and your farm is up again. This is how the patching works on SharePoint. Please be sure to patch outside of the business hours if possible, to be sure that the impact is minimum for business. And for public facing websites on SharePoint, please try to do them on a Sunday at noon or 8 o'clock in the morning to be sure that the impact is minimum for the business as for public users. The patching on SharePoint Server, don't install the cumulative updates automatically because we know that the CUs, etc. are now integrated with Windows Server. The CUs will now show up in the Windows Update as important updates, meaning they get installed automatically without notice. So please don't do that because you don't know what you're installing and maybe it will just break some custom components or custom codes, etc. So how do you avoid that? Just download it and install it manually, first on the swap server, then on D, then on Q, then on P, or use WAAD, Windows Server Update Services. I said if a custom component is used or installed, they can break some functionalities. Patching, you also need testers. It's cool, it's great to install cumulative update service packs. You will get new services, but you need testers to be sure that your sites are up and that all functionalities created by developers are still working. And if you use the Windows updates, well, you don't have real governance for dev, non-prod, and prod environments, as the Windows update will show at the same time for all servers. So my rule, my golden point to you is please use the WAAD to be sure that you're installing and you know what you're installing. On the client side, please be sure that the operating system has the latest updates as possible. And the antivirus on the client side, on the client's laptops, on desktop, etc., that you turn out the real-time scan for enterprise computers. Turn off scanning for Windows updates, for Windows security files, group policy files, system fault files, DFS, and DHCP files. It's not something to the business, it's not something to the developers, but this is especially for administrators who should actually exclude files from real-time scan. These 5-6 things, please exclude them. Office and Internet Explorer makes sense. For Office, use the latest version of Office. And for Internet Explorer also, the supported versions are 8, 9, 10, 11. Here, be sure which EA version is suitable for you. If you are using EA 8, be sure that the drag and drop won't work. If you want to use drag and drop, and if it's a business requirement, be sure to be using the 10 or 11. Okay, make it sense? Cool. So, a summary, to be sure, to understand, use SharePoint Server if there is no budget problem, if you have a lot of money, if you can't promise 99.99% of uptime, and if this is not a problem for your business. If you don't have any knowledge about cloud, Azure, Office 365, etc., and if you have already an existing SharePoint server that fits the business requirements. If the cloud is a no-go for you, definitely. I know a lot of companies, due to security restrictions, they will never go to the cloud. And if it's mandatory and a business requirement to have custom code, layouts, and settings, like I can't imagine Ferrari selling their Ferraris with a team site. They need customization. Go to SharePoint Online or to the cloud if the cloud is not a problem for your organization. If it's a small company of 10 people, and they don't care about security, about their documents, well, you can go to the cloud. If you can't handle SharePoint and its friends, if you don't have the knowledge about how to manage SharePoint Server and its friends. If you don't have the budget for a fully redundant farm, with a fully redundant, please remember the 7 is a new 5. You need 7 servers for a farm and the consultants. If you have to begin from scratch, if you never used SharePoint, well, please use the online version, not the SharePoint server, SharePoint on-premises. And if you want to have all the new feature solutions and pay less. And the last point, if you can't promise a 99.9 of SLA to your business. These are the points that actually should make the reflection between should I go to the cloud or should I stay on premises. And depending on each answer that you give, well, you can choose to go online or to stay on premises. The summary, the final summary, final slide, we're all done. Performance, well, it all depends. It's not only SharePoint, as I showed, it's also SQL, it's also Windows, it's also IIS, it's also how you use SharePoint, the backups, the continuous crawl, the services that you're using, the distribution of load of your search. Other platforms also matters, definitely, because, okay, SharePoint is slow, but maybe it's slow because your SQL is slow. Maybe it's slow because the authentication has a problem on AD level, etc., etc. SharePoint is fast, definitely, yes. When you install the first time, it's very fast, but unfortunately, it depends much on other systems. And yeah, you can improve, and improve. There is no way to say, okay, I made my best, it's all done. No, there is always way to improve, and improve. Here are the references of pictures and technical libraries and blogs that I've taken on my site. You can always have a look at it. And it's time for questions. So if you have any question, just shoot it out. Or if you want to tweet about it, just do it. I will try to answer. There is a text, there is a chat here. Write your text on the chat. I will try to answer. Or if you want to send me an email, well, do it. It's on gokan@neoxy.be. That's all. Thank you all for listening. I know we saw more than 70 slides. I know it's a huge session, but the content was optimized for you to see in 1 hour all aspects on how to actually manage, govern your SharePoint, to be sure that your SharePoint responds very fast and that the question about should you move to the cloud or not will actually never come. Again, thank you all for listening to me, and hope to see you one time. Bye bye.